Because what you, the unsung heroes in the wastewater industry, do matters. Join me, Suzan Chin-Taylor, the DooDoo Diva, a longtime veteran of the wastewater, trenchless, and civil infrastructure industry each week as I deliver industry know-how from industry pros who know how. Whether you want to learn about the latest trends in technology, training and retaining great talent, sales and marketing, leadership and growth, or simply how to be more efficient, productive, or profitable, this podcast is for you. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the DooDoo Diva Smells Like Money podcast. Today, this is the first of a two-part series, and we are visiting with Dr. Sam Ariaratnam. Did I get that right?
Ariaratnam.
Ariaratnam. Okay, thank you. I'm always getting corrected by my husband with my, Hindi and that part of the world pronunciation. So forgive me for butchering that one. And I am so thrilled that Dr. Sam is joining us because I've been wanting to bring him onto this podcast almost since the inception. Dr. Sam, for those of you who are not aware of who he is a professor at ASU, and he is the Sun State Chair of Construction Management and Engineering, and is also known to many of us in the trenchless field as being one of the great pioneers and champions, and really an authority on the world of trenchless technology and pushing it forward to solve many of the problems that we are dealing with aging infrastructure here in the United States and around the world. And I'm just so excited to have you here. And so welcome to the show, Dr. Sam.
Great, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, today we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to your heart, and that's, aging infrastructure and how do we deal with it? And we've got cities, we talked about offline about what we wanted to talk about today, the spending gap, and always having to stretch the money with these limited budgets and having to do more with less and less, which is really a big challenge. And I just wanted you to share with the audience what are some of your ideas or things that they can do to address those things they need to address. You had a great analogy about, the heart doctor on how to prevent what was going to be happening to you, as well as the colonoscopy, and you can touch on that, and the needs for a good asset management plan. And with all that in a nutshell, I want to hear your words of wisdom. How do we attack this problem beneath our streets that we just can't kick the can down the road anymore?
Well, certainly. And I think one of the things that, you have to recognize when you're looking at underground infrastructure, our water, our sewer systems, is that they're hidden. We really don't think about them until, we turn on our water and it's a different color, or we can't flush our toilets, or things like that. Whereas if you're looking at a road or a bridge, you can physically see if there's some damage to those systems and then do those repairs hopefully before it gets too catastrophic. With water and sewer systems and our other infrastructure utilities, they're underground, they're hidden. And so that means we have to be creative, and municipalities need to look at ways of assessing those systems but much like the human body, doing preventive maintenance. And so, one of the things that we do is we send cameras, CCTV cameras and other technologies within our systems so that we can go and identify and try to identify if there's some deterioration that's occurring, much like you would in a colonoscopy, right? Going in. And then we have smart people that look at that data and try to analyze and figure out, what would be the best remedy? What's the solution to addressing that? And sometimes we leave it for a bit, or we address it right away, depending on the severity of the deterioration. And I think, the funding gap between what's available, in funding to what needs to be spent, it just gets, larger and larger every year. And so that's where the creativity has to be done. And so a municipality needs to look at this and say, I have this much money in my yearly capital expenditure budget, and I need to spend that wisely. And what really hurts that is when you have a catastrophe or an unexpected break of one of those lines. because now you have to take money from that capital improvement budget to address the emergency repair that has to be done, which obviously is going to be a lot more expensive than a planned
Mhm.
repair.
Right. So, you alluded to the fact of the importance to kind of stave off those emergencies coming up. Emergencies are going to happen, they are. But to help maybe mitigate the severity or the frequency or the number of them, it all comes down to having a good, as you said, an asset management plan. And so, as someone that works in this construction management arena, what are some of the key elements that these utilities or these cities need to have in place as part of that plan in order to, as you were saying, stretch that dollar as much as they possibly can?
Well, we all know that, in like a human body, preventive maintenance is the most important, right? And likewise, it's no different. It's doing that maintenance, those yearly maintenance activities in the system, don't allowing those systems to get to that point where they're going to break. And so we want to extend the life of those systems. And by doing that maintenance, you can certainly go a long way in doing that. And that's where having that asset management system to really truly understand within your community or your jurisdiction, what are the conditions as best as you can of those pipelines. And we do a lot of things where we do predictive models where we'll
Mhm.
predict deterioration, and when we get to that stage where we have to do some sort of remedy to kind of extend the life of that pipeline. And so looking at that, and then, when we decide that we have to do something, looking at innovative technologies, and that's where trenchless technologies come into place. I mean, we have a family of methods of technologies
Right.
that can be utilized to install new water and sewer lines and other utilities, and also to rehabilitate those systems as well. And really the key with trenchless technologies is minimal disruption to surface activities, right? We call them no dig technologies, but really, they're less dig technologies, right? And so that's what we're doing. We're not digging as much into the road. We're making very small incisions in most places to be able to do those repairs or installations.
Because we think about, you live down in the valley in the Phoenix metro area, and we've all seen over the last 10 years how that whole metro area, construction wise, it's just literally exploded. Exploded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's putting a lot of tax on the systems, right? Where, we built these, for example, a water line or a sewer line, that these lines are 50, 60, 70
Right.
plus years old. And they were in all these buildings around. There were houses. And now you're building these subdivisions and you're trying to feed off those lines. So we have to upsize those lines, make them bigger so they can handle more of the capacity issues of the urban growth that's happening. And it's not just Phoenix, it's all over the world.
Right.
I travel internationally quite extensively, and when you go to places like Shanghai, China, or Beijing, or Sao Paulo, Brazil, I'm going to India here in a few weeks, and these are like big metropolitan cities of 20 to 30 million
Right.
people in the city. And so you have these systems, these water and sewer systems that really need a lot of attention to. And you just can't shut down the main street in Beijing or in Delhi or Sao Paulo or any of these big cities and just do the repair. You have to find creative ways or trenchless technologies to be able to do those repairs without shutting down the main artery for transportation in these cities.
Right. It's kind of almost forcing these cities to adopt new technologies, which, as we've seen, it's I haven't been able to wrap my head around this as long as I've been in the industry, is that there is such a risk aversion to new technology. There's like a fear. What if it goes wrong? Well, but what if it doesn't? And it's sometimes you don't have a choice with doing something trenchlessly. It comes down to that. And you alluded to a project that, because they're a really good example, and I want you to share some of the highlights of that. The Central Arizona project, because it is in Metro Phoenix, and how this organization or this utility has been really proactive in keeping up with the aging infrastructure, but also it sounds to me from what you shared, and I want you to delve into this, that they're doing a really good job of preparing for the future of the city as it's been growing and as it's been expanding. Because I'm even seeing areas, or my husband has shared because he's been in the area longer than I have, areas that were single family homes are now being torn down to make that they're going vertical with the construction instead of going horizontal. So it's denser population, which of course is putting a big tax on a system. And so tell us a little bit about your experience with that organization and what you've seen that they've been doing that's been really working well for them.
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, CAP, or Central Arizona Project, they move water. That's what they do. They move water. So they're not really addressing, in a community, so to speak. They're moving the water around.
Right.
But they have large diameter water pipes. And these are a lot of them are pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipes. I mean, these are pipes that you can walk in, basically. And so if you were to have a break of one of those pipelines, that would be a catastrophic. The amount of water that would be lost into the system, and it would basically create a river in potentially, right? And so they have a really good maintenance program. They take a proactive maintenance strategy where they'll go and they'll shut down pipes and do inspections of them at regular intervals, just to make sure that, they keep those pipes, and the ones that need to be repaired, they go and make those repairs in a timely fashion. And I think it's great having, for them, having that actual process in place that they do to eliminate that. They also use technologies, like acoustic monitoring of these pre-stressed pipes to make sure that, if they were to start to break, that they could hear those breaks, wire breaks of the pre-stressed pipe, and address those very quickly. And so that's a really good example of an agency, the CAP, Central Arizona Project, that has done a good job of from an asset management perspective and a preventive maintenance perspective of looking at the pipes. I'll give you an example, and not to be negative to them, but on June 5th of this year, a big pre-stressed section of pre-stressed pipe burst in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and it was a major feeder of water to Calgary, and many people lost their water. It was a major catastrophe that occurred, and Calgary was like, well, we've got to do something now, right? And I was just actually in Calgary a week and a half ago, and this section of pipe, it broke, and they had to get a repair really quickly. And San Diego County Water, they actually had a couple sections of pipe that was available that they shipped up to Calgary.
Wow.
That's a great example of agency interaction, where they did so that they could do that repair and get the system up and running. But now they've gone and done some acoustic testing and that to see what the rest of their system is like, because it was such a serious impact to Calgary in June there, when that pipe broke, and created big flooding in the area, obviously, and just those types of things. But it was a pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe, and it broke.
And we don't even want to think. I mean, we're talking about water, which is, clean water distribution, or water coming from the water supply to be treated. But just imagine if that had been a main sanitary trunk sewer filled with raw sewage coming into the plant, if you had had a catastrophic failure in a major city with sewage.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that cities have been doing for the last 20 plus years is, back in the day, some cities had combined sewers. So they had storm sewers and sanitary sewers in one. And now they're doing, the separation of these, right? Because that just didn't make sense, right? If you had a big storm event and you have sewer in there, then you have a big problem that can occur. But certainly from an environmental perspective, sewer lines that break, I mean, that's a nightmare from that perspective.
Just waiting to be happened. So the key is that even though you may not have the budget, you still need to prioritize. And there's a great quote from Teddy Roosevelt. I just love it. Do all you can with what you have where you are. And it's just, cities just embrace tools, embrace technology, do everything that you possibly can with the budget you have, because it almost sounds like today with aging technology or aging infrastructure, it's going to be a case of pay me now or pay me later.
100%.
And if you have to pay me later, it's going to be a lot more expensive.
Well, and that's the old adage. Like, I mean, you have a lot of tools in your toolbox, right? There's a lot of different options. I mean, open cut certainly is one option, and then there's the trenchless options as well too. And that there's an old saying that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so
like
we,
that.
we look at all the tools that we have available to us in the toolbox, and we have to make smart decisions on what we're going to do. I mean, if we're repairing a sewer line, how do we repair it? Do we use a cured in place liner? Do we use a slip line system? I mean, those are some of the decisions, and that's what the engineers are there for. They're making those informed decisions, and as a trenchless engineer, right, you would make that decision. If you were putting a new line in, you'd have to decide which technology you were going to use, and there's a lot of factors that we look at. And so what I always tell my students and people that ask about trenchless, I tell them that, instead of putting tools in a basket, you have a basket and you include all the available technologies in that basket. And then you start looking at, what's the length of it? Okay, now I can remove some tools. What is it, a sewer water? I can remove some tools. What's the diameter? Is it on grade? Is it a gravity? Is it a non-gravity flow? I mean, all of these different, characteristics of the project, what kind of soil conditions, those types of things. And then you're left with, a couple of tools or a couple of different options, and then you can make that decision of what you're going to utilize to address your water wastewater needs. And I think that's a smart way of looking.
That is a great segue and a teaser into what we're going to follow up in the second part of our conversation, which is about trenchless technology, the trends, all of the things available, where the market is headed, and what we should be looking for or considering to solving aging, buried infrastructure issues. And so with that, Dr. Sam, thank you for having this conversation and sharing your wisdom. And for anybody interested in knowing more about what Dr. Sam does, he has a profile on LinkedIn, and that will be shared in the show notes for this episode. Take a look about what he shares on LinkedIn, and he is just a wealth of knowledge and just someone to really, really tap if you're trying to know more about, okay, so what do I do now? And again, thank you for being on the show, and thank you, audience, for tuning in. And be sure to watch for the next episode where we continue this fascinating conversation. And until next time, keep it flowing.
Be sure to subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you're an industry expert and would like to be considered as a guest on the show, click the Be a Podcast guest link below in the show notes for more information. Thanks again for joining me, the DooDoo Diva, on this week's episode of the Smells Like Money podcast.